Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to Peace Fund Radio with Ethan Dettenmaier and Adrian Paul, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Well, another week, another dollar. I just came back from Sacramento. Beautiful city.
What were you doing up there?
I was doing a convention. I actually did my very first sword demo.
Really? Fantastic.
It's kind of interesting. It's up on my Facebook page now for those of you that haven't seen it. It's interesting. It was a very eclectic group of people, and the funniest thing was 60% of the attendees, there were 30 people attending, 60% of those were ladies. In a sword demo. But, you know, everybody got to play, and went on for 2 hours, and I think we're going to be doing more of these somewhere down the line.
You should. I'm not surprised. I think that's...
Well, I've never really wanted to do one, you know. It's like, I don't know if I want to do this, and I'm not qualified, and... But I guess I am. I've done. I was looking the other day. I've done hundreds, literally, probably a couple of hundred sword fights, or about 150 sword fights, or something like that.
Really?
So, yeah, something I was doing.
That almost sounds like a Guinness Book of World Records.
I doubt it. I'm sure there are other people who've done a lot more than me. But
yeah, but on
camera, I'll be getting up there, I guess.
On camera, yeah. I mean,
yeah, I'll be getting up there, I suppose.
Maybe like back in the old Zorro TV show when they did 40 episodes a season.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's where
like
that's where you clock up the miles is on TV, you know.
Yeah. So
yes. So how was your week?
My week was good. It was busy, as you know. We've got an event tonight.
Yes, indeed. I'll be coming by to check that out.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, I thought I'd dean you with my presence.
Well, that's
dean you with my presence.
That actually is. It's much appreciated.
I know. That's the way I am. You know.
You're very, very. It's hard to be you.
Well, I haven't heard that one for a while.
Well, I've been.
Have you been keeping it in the closet?
No, you know. In all honesty, I'm glad you're coming by because it's always great to have a friend in a situation like this, and you always align yourself with good causes. So it's a nice parallel for us, and I believe you know Sheila E.
Yes, I do. Years ago.
Event.
Yeah, I knew her through a friend of mine years ago.
Prince?
Fantastic.
That friend?
No, not that friend. No, fantastic drummer. She was an amazing drummer.
Still is.
Yeah, I'm sure she is.
Still is. In fact,
but you know.
In fact, I can't reveal the details of the show tonight, but you may see some of that if you're present.
Interesting.
Yeah, you may see some of that.
Interesting.
This is going to be something we do every Wednesday. We're going to partner ourselves every Wednesday with a different organization, but we're going to also partner up with different producers and showrunners to do a completely different show. So next week, Johnny Vatos of Oingo Boingo is the house jazz band, but we're going to have different musicians. Next week is the producers of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and the producers of Roseanne and the producers of Undeclared and Disney Imagineer Bob Gurr. So I'm not. Oh, and the Jurassic Park motor pool. We'll have all the vehicles for the Jurassic Park film. But
wait a minute, not the new one, because that new one has just gone astronomically off the charts.
Yeah, for some
have you noticed that?
Ones, yes, it's actually doing quite well.
Quite well.
Thought dinosaurs were.
Oh my gosh, who thought they were extinct?
Yeah, really, exactly.
Not anymore.
But it's gonna. It should be fun. I don't want to dominate the conversation about this. There's more important causes, but. Should be a fun time, and tonight we'll see you. And there's going to be a broadcast desk. We have some experience working a broadcast desk together.
Ah, yes, and, that'll be interesting.
Red carpet at 6, show at 7, which means probably 7:30.
Yeah, exactly. Red carpet at 6:45.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, celebrities such as myself will probably turn up last minute.
No, you're going to want to show up on time for this, I think, because I got some people, especially from the Warner Brothers and Universal side, producing side, that want to talk to you. So.
We shall talk C.A.C.
So
listen.
Don't put in a graceful 5 minutes. Put in a graceful hour.
Okay, I'll put in a graceful 15.
Thank you. Okay.
No, I will. Anyway, we are talking about child abuse. Child abuse.
Yes.
This is where we are. We're in protecting children at the moment. We're going to continue our month-long look at child protection. Child abuse is just more than bruises and broken bones. While physical abuse might be most visible, there are other types of abuse, such as emotional and neglect, which also leave deep, lasting scars. The earlier an abused child gets help, the greater chance they have to heal and break the cycle, which is very similar to anything else, like if you catch a cold, if you catch any disease, the sooner you get it, the better it is. So by learning about the common signs of abuse and what you can do to intervene, you can make a huge difference in a child's life. Now, we're going to be talking to an expert on this later on in the show. I'll bring that to you in a second. But let's get some facts out there. 1 in 10 children suffer from child maltreatment. 1 in 16 children suffer from sexual abuse, and nearly 1 in 10 are witnesses to family violence. Now, you might not think that that's an abuse for a child, but it does leave scars if you see things that are being violently dealt with in your household. The youngest children are the most vulnerable. Over 25% of abused children are under the age of 3, while over 45% of abused children are under the age of 5. Of the number of children who died because of abuse or neglect, 70.3% were younger than 3 years old, and 44.4% were younger than 1 year old. Think about that. In over 20% of the child fatalities, the child was exposed to domestic violence in the home. Numbers of reports of child abuse every year in the United States, 2.9 million. In a U.S. Department of Health and Human Services study of homeless youth, it's found that 46% of those surveyed had escaped a home where they suffered physical abuse, and 17% left because of sexual abuse. Now, there are sexual predators, and I think we've come a long way from the past where, there was no recrimination for people that do create these types of sexual abuse. For instance, there are websites now that can tell you if anybody's a sexual offender in your area. If you move into a new area, you might want to check that out if you have young kids.
Isn't that a great tool?
Yes, it is. It's a fantastic tool. Where I lived before, they were miles away. But it doesn't mean people don't travel. But this point about sexual abuse is a strange topic, because that can represent a myriad of things, whether it's actual involvement in it or whether you actually were in the room at the time. I was watching a program at one point where 2 16-year-olds were having consensual sex or whatever, and the guy was in the same house, and he was brought on charges for allowing underage sex. So he got a sex criminal citation against him, and he got onto that. So, where's it?
That requires an asterisk of an explanation.
Yeah,
I think.
It does a bit. I mean, in a sense, but you still get labelled with, you go onto that website, right. You're still going to be put on that website as being that person, and everybody's going to know about it. Now, even when I was a young kid, I think a lot of the time, why does this go unchecked? And it goes unchecked. And I think I've talked about this before on the show. It goes unchecked because sometimes we're ashamed that somebody that has been abused it's done by somebody that and you don't want to say something, and you just go, well, it just happened once, or that doesn't work. When I was 15 I think I was, my brother it was a little younger, it was about 13. My brother was sexually abused. And by a cook in the hotel that we were staying at. It was a hotel we went to every single year. It was a great place. My family went there every single year. And this year, my brother had gone there with the other parts of my family and actually happened to be there on his own. And when I got there, I started talking to him. He was acting a little weird, and he told me some stuff that happened. And I went, what? And I didn't say anything. I saw the guy, and I always remember this, and I've said this before. I remember him turning at me, and it was like a leer he had. And I was like, really? And I didn't say anything right off the bat. I did say something later, but about a month later, about this. But at the time, I felt ashamed for my brother. And it was, I guess, but siblings have to stand up for their brothers and sisters and tell people about what has happened. And not think that it's, adults have to be accepting of the fact that no wrong has been done by the child. Although as a child, you put it on yourself saying, I did something wrong. It was me that did it wrong. And I think that you've got to really look at that.
Well.
Now, look, there's several types of child abuse. The core element ties them together is the emotional effect on the child. Doesn't matter whether it's sexual or mental or whatever. The child needs predictability, structure, clear boundaries, and the knowledge that their parents are always looking out for their safety, which includes, we've talked about safety before. We've talked a couple of weeks ago, pool safety, safety on the streets, safety in your neighborhood, safety in your home, a lot of different things. But also abused children need to know that their parents will act if something happens to them. But abused children, they can't predict how that will happen. Their world is an unpredictable, frightening place with no rules. Whether the abuse is a slap, a harsh comment, stony silence, or not knowing if there will be a dinner on the table tonight, the end result is a child that feels unsafe, uncared for, and alone. Have you seen that? Have you seen that thing called The Slap? The series called The Slap?
No, but I heard about it.
Very interesting. It was interesting because it was not so much about. Well, it was about the slap, which caused a ripple effect. It was at a party, and I've mentioned this before. It's very well written because it actually shows you the events. The first episode shows you what happened at this party when one of the adults slaps a child, and how the parents take it on themselves along the line to blame, segregate. It goes all the way down the line as to how the relationships are all torn apart. And the interesting thing that happens at the end is the fact that it's not just the person that caused the slap that's actually at fault. It's a lot of other issues that happen with your child that lead up to that one point. So it's an interesting, and what they do each week was they have 8 shows, I think it is.
Was that what it is? It was like a mini series, right?
Yeah, like a mini series. But they did it very well because there were, there was 8 main characters, I would imagine, 6, 7, 8 main characters, and each week they would highlight the story of one of the characters, how they dealt with this particular situation. And it dealt from the mother and father of the child that got slapped, from the parents of the man that was slapped, of the guy that was slapped, of the friends of the people that were, and this is where it comes down to the interesting point of what we deal with, which is the relationship you have with somebody who has caused that. If it's part of the family, do you stand up for them, or do you actually put them into a different category? You are pressured by your peers to act a certain way. And I think that was one of the things I got out of this thing, is that it was never clear-cut black and white. It was always very grey. You live in a house, or your family or your friends are actually a party to this, and well, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with it? Have you ever been in that situation, Ethan?
What situation specifically are we talking about? Like a situation where I've seen it as an adult, seen 2 kids?
Well, have you ever been in a situation where you've seen something happen to a child and not been able to say anything because of, it's somebody else's job to deal with it?
No, I haven't. Probably by sheer luck. I don't know how I'd react if I saw it.
It's interesting. You see if you were in the street and you saw a parent, there's different ways of doing it. I mean, if a child gets spanked on the bottom rather than slapped around the head, is that different? Is that a different form of abuse? Is that acceptable?
It's
a tough question.
I would
bring John Bealey on, because I want some other opinions on here. Where is he?
That's a tough one. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
How are you?
It depends.
How do you do this?
It depends. It depends.
Again, there's fine lines,
we can
isn't
all
it?
Use our judgment if somebody's just, if it's a disciplinary spank to wake somebody up versus if somebody wants to hammer somebody home and is quite abusive about it.
Well, it's a slap around the face, a slap around the head, or slap on the bottom or on the hands.
I'm not in favor of any abuse to the head or face of children, of course. But if a kid was throwing a tantrum and I saw a parent pick the kid up and spank the kid and say, "Don't do that," I don't think I would be too bothered.
Yeah, I'm not either, and I know that's going to shock a lot of people. I'm not
everyone's
going
to hate us for that.
Yeah, I know they're going to hate, but the fact is, I think kids have to be given certain set of rules.
Yeah.
You give them. There are escalating troubles. In other words, if a child does one thing, there's a warning. If a child does another thing, there's a timeout. If a child does something that is harmful to their siblings, to themselves, or something, they have to understand that there are things that will happen to them that will be a lot worse than a smack on the bottom. And so, for me personally, I come from old school. But I've changed my ways along the time through what it's proven to show that kids don't respond to being spanked all the time. They respond to understanding that there are parameters to their actions, that they have to respond correctly, and you teach them how to respond, no matter how frustrating it can be. But smacking them around the side of the head is not acceptable at all.
Yeah, well, I agree with that.
John, what about you? Have you ever been in a situation that you've had to not?
I haven't, and again, my answer would be the same as Ethan's, out of pure luck. thankfully. I don't have children of my own, but most of my friends do. And, every once in a while, yes, I mean, kids, a kid needs a spanking sometimes. It just happens. But for the most part, I've never witnessed anything that gave me concern.
Now, what do you do if you're out in the street and you see something like that happen? How would you react?
Well, I think as Ethan said, it all sort of depends on the context. I mean, if you see somebody really violently hurting their child, I mean, it's you have to do something. But again, it's that line.
Is it your right to do something? Do you step up? How do you deal with it? I mean, that's an interesting. You see somebody spanking their child, or grabbing them hard and throwing them around, or something like that.
Well,
do you
those
step
are
up?
Two different things.
Well,
yeah.
And that's the gray area that the police have to deal with when somebody calls. Is like, this guy's abusing his child, and it could have just been a spanking for the kid throwing his plate down on the street and throwing a tantrum.
Right.
You never know. It's challenging. But if somebody's going to throw a kid down, that's a totally different manner. That's threading on the dangerous.
Do you remember the old saying about sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me? Well, I mean, that's basically emotional abuse, which can be as severely damaging to a child's mental or social health, or social development, but which can leave psychological scars. Now, there's different ways that can happen as well: belittling, shaming, humiliating, calling names, making negative comparisons to others. We all do this, though. This is something I think we all do, don't we? I mean, sometimes you go, "Oh, you're such an idiot," or "You're such and such," and that too is damaging to a child. So I think you've got to be careful what you call your child as well, what name you call them, whether you yell at them, you threaten them. I think this is. The other thing is, which I think is, how do you do? Okay, let me ask you a question, guys. How do you deal with your child if they do something as punishment? What are your forms? What do you think your forms of punishment would be for a child? Would you give them the silent treatment? Would you, what would you do to them?
I don't know if the silent treatment's that good either. I don't really recommend the silent treatment for kids.
Same here. I think conversation and communication are tops.
And there it is. That was another trick question, because you're absolutely correct. It is physically, it's psychologically damaging if you do that to a child. You don't give them the You have to talk to them about it. You have to show them what cause effect and causes on the thing that they've done. What happens, and you've got to talk to them so they understand it. I mean, if they don't understand it, they just shut off. No hugs, no kisses, or signs of affection can also, limited contact, physical contact with a child is damaging, because they come from. I mean, you look at kids when they're a year old; they're clinging to their moms. They're clinging to. When you stop doing that, by the time they're 5 or 6 or 7 years old, that can actually stop them from emotionally connecting later on in their own lives as they grow up. So it is damaging when you actually do that. So it's. I wouldn't say it's child abuse, but it is a neglect to an extent.
Psychological child abuse, maybe.
Yeah, it's funny because last night I was watching. I can't remember what we were watching, and the father kissed his son, who was, a little older, on the top of the head. My wife said, "I hope you never stop doing that with Royce." And I was like, I would never do that. I mean, I'm going to hug them and squeeze them as long as I'm their father, they're my child, and I don't care if they're 10, 15, or 22. Still going to get it from me, because that's the way it is. And they'll probably go, "Oh, Dad, don't do that. No. You're embarrassing me."
Right.
And probably you will do, because every child you're going to go through
does it.
Yeah, and every child goes through the 12 to 15-year-old where I hate you. You're going to get that, but it's like my kid woke up this morning and he came down going, and I just I was like, you can't take for the next half an hour he was like that, and I'm like, really? You woke up like this morning? But you got to sort of take it so you can try and change it. It's hard to do, but I think you have to address it in that respect.
It's challenging.
Indeed.
So we bring on an expert. We have actually an expert waiting in the wings to talk about this very thing.
Let's bring him on, actually. Do you want to actually talk a little bit about him? Because
Yeah, this is a great human being. We talk about the bad guys that are out there. This is one of the good guys. I'm on another show that I'm on at modernmythmedia.com that was created by my friend Sean Gerber to celebrate superhero cinema and the movies that make up modern mythology. A few months ago, I heard from one of our listeners named Alex Brace, and immediately noticed that his work was with children. Alex is the crisis counselor at Small Talk Children's Assessment Center at smalltalkcac.org in East Lansing, Michigan since November of 2011. Working with children has been his passion for many years. He's trained in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, specializes in working with kids and adolescents who have been impacted by abuse and trauma. He has a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in counseling from Michigan State University. He has done volunteer work and interning in different populations of the mental health field throughout Michigan and Wisconsin over the past 9 years, and is a licensed counselor in the state of Michigan. And he's going to talk to us today about his work in the trenches every day with children who have undergone serious abuse and trauma.
All right, here we go. Let's try and get this guy on the phone.
It's interesting. I mean, as our producer has given us, maybe you even did, John, there's a lot of questions here that I think we can ask. I mean, it could take us an hour, but I don't think we'll have that amount of time.
This is Alex.
Alex, good morning. How are you? It's Adrian Paul here, John Bailey and Ethan Dettenmaier from Peace on Radio. How are you?
Good, great.
Good. So John has given us a little breakdown. You've worked as a crisis counsellor for a few years now.
Yes, the last 3 years.
That's
almost
3 years.
4.
And what type of crisis counselling do you usually see, or do you work with?
We work with children who've been physically and sexually abused throughout the county that we serve here in Michigan. So it's Ingham County. We serve children between the ages of 3 and 17 who've been impacted by severe physical abuse and sexual abuse as well in our county.
What do you think is the biggest challenge when you first start, and what's the biggest challenge once you stop the counselling that you see for the kids that are under your care?
I think the biggest challenge is kind of just getting everybody on board. The way that we kind of structure things here at Small Talk is we work as a team. So we have law enforcement representation, so they're the ones who are doing the investigations of the abuse. We have prosecutors who are prosecuting these cases. And we have child protective services workers as well as myself as a counselor and medical professionals. So we all kind of collaborate and we work together, and we work together really well. But sometimes it can be difficult just to get, to get the families on board. Sometimes can be difficult.
Really? Why? Why?
I think sometimes. I think when a kid discloses that they've been abused, it's kind of a shock to the entire family, and it kind of shakes the foundation of everything that the family was initially based on. A lot of times these cases are done by, the perpetrator is somebody who lives in the home or somebody who is close with the family. So when you lose somebody out of that family relationship because of, they've done something horrible to a child in that family, sometimes that really shakes the foundation, and sometimes the parents, they start feeling guilty. The kids start feeling guilty about, thinking that they broke up their family when that's honestly not the case. It's the person who did this. It's 100% their fault. But sometimes that can be a hurdle that is difficult sometimes for us to overcome.
It's interesting. I was talking earlier in the show about my brother who had been abused when he was young, in his 10 years old, 9 years old, by somebody that was a cook at a place we went to every single year, and he told me about it, and I was ashamed for the first 2 or 3 weeks without saying anything that this had happened, and I didn't want anybody to sort of. So I think it's a similar type of feeling that parents and relatives and anybody else that knows about it would possibly initially have.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with that. I think it's a really difficult, because, like I said, I think it's a shock to the family, to the foundation. We learned a lot, and when I was in school about how lots of times when you take somebody who used to be an alcoholic in a family and they become sober, sometimes that really changes the dynamic of the family, and sometimes it's difficult for them to adjust because everybody has these different roles now that mom or dad isn't drinking every day. And I think it works in similar ways with abuse, is that this person, dad, might not be in the house anymore, and there's a lot of financial stresses that can come with that. social stuff. Kids get really angry when these things happen. Guilt is probably the most common, emotion that I see kids struggling with in the kids that I work with.
So when you have a child in you that's either been physically or mentally or sexually abused in a certain way, obviously it's been taken through a system. Obviously, you mentioned law enforcement. There is, a process that is happening already underway. How do you deal with the child? What's the process you kind of go through? What do you have to do?
Well, how it starts is usually when a kid discloses that they've been, physically or sexually abused, it gets reported to law enforcement or to Child Protective Services. Then what they do is they call us at Small Talk here. We set up an interview with somebody who's a forensic interviewer. So they're going to be doing a non-biased, fact-finding interview for these particular kids. And then that case gets turned over to law enforcement. And what I do, my part of it, is I will meet with the family before the interview and let them know who I am, what kind of resources we have here, and let them know that we are here to offer free counseling for them if that's something that they feel like they need. So that's kind of my role in the entire process.
So when the process happens, is there a time when, because obviously when somebody reports it, it's either a family member, it's somebody that's seen something. Is there a time that child now is still vulnerable to this abuse? And does the person who actually reports it understand this? I mean, obviously you said they've got to check and see whether or not this abuse is happening. It doesn't happen immediately. It probably takes, how long does it usually take for them to check and to put a stop to it?
Usually that we'll take care of that immediately. If there are any immediate safety concerns, we always have law enforcement or Child Protective Services present at any interview that we have that they're involved with. So if there are any immediate safety concerns and we interview the kid and they say, well, Dad is still coming over to the house every once in a while, that's where we talk to law enforcement and they can, go through the proper channels and file the kind of paperwork to make sure that Dad can't be over there, or we'll come up with a safety plan for them to make sure that they're safe for the duration of the investigation. Because obviously their immediate safety is our primary concern.
So what do you think the biggest misconceptions of a child that's been abused? I mean, what do people, because obviously there are different levels and different types of abuse. What do you think the biggest misconception from people about abused children is?
I think a lot of it is the emotional reactions to abuse. I think a lot of times when kids have been abused, they react with a lot of anger, especially younger kids who don't always have the verbal language to be able to describe what they're going through or how they're feeling about certain things. They'll act out behaviorally. And I think before abuse gets disclosed, I think a lot of times that can get confused for other behavioral issues, or they're getting bullied at school, or we think he has ADHD or something like that. And I think that one of the things that we miss is when we're talking with these kids and when we're seeing these kind of behaviors, this is something that we need to check on, because I think in talking with parents, a lot of what I see, and I don't blame the parents for this, but they can kind of, after it's been disclosed, they kind of see the writing on the wall, for lack of a better term, and they're able to see, oh, this is why, she was acting this way, or, this is why she was doing this. It wasn't necessarily related to another situation. It was related to that's how they're reacting and that's how they're trying to cope with their abuse. But what they're doing is not a positive, not a healthy way for them to cope with their abuse. So I think that's a pretty big misconception. That and the fact that sexual abuse happens to, or that it's strangers who sexually abuse or physically abuse kids. We through research and through our experience here, we've had very few stranger assaults at all. It's almost entirely people that the family knows or
don't you find that
family member.
Don't you find that so? It's such a sad thing when you think about it, really, because these children, they come into our lives, they're in our care as adults, and yet, we prey on them, and they're our own children, or they're our own family that are prey. It's how do you? I mean, what are these issues? How do they contribute to this type of child abuse? What are the contributing factors?
I think that's a good question. I think there is, if people are abused, they're more likely to abuse. And that's why education is so important, and that's why that's something that we really need to start pushing just in the community in general is, education about sexual abuse and physical abuse, because that is, when you talk about sexual abuse especially, I think that's a touchy subject, and people don't feel comfortable saying the words or talking to their kids about these things. And I think that's a really important factor in kind of mitigating the impact is, and hopefully decreasing the numbers that we see over time is being able to talk to our kids about, what is safe touch, letting them know that their body is their body, and if they don't want a hug from grandma for whatever reason, that it's okay for them to say no. And, I can even think back to just personal experiences of growing up, and, my family would want me to give a hug, and there was nothing that, I just didn't want to. But I think we kind of force kids to put themselves in those kind of social situations where they might not feel comfortable, and we need to kind of help empower them to find that comfort themselves and find out what is comfortable for them instead of having us dictate what is comfortable for them.
That's so true. I mean, my wife would say that to them, as and we say if you don't want to hug that person or say hello to them, that's okay. That's all right. That's fine. But us, we tend to do that. And I remember when I was a kid, they go, "Oh, go give Auntie, Claire a hug or a kiss," and you go, what about you, Ethan? Did you ever get that, or do you do that with your child when they want you go into it? Oh, go give them a hug and a kiss, and you pressure them into doing it.
I don't pressure my kid to do much of anything. If you probably are aware.
Well, I'm probably aware of that. Yeah.
But certainly, I never try to force uncomfortable situations. I let her gravitate, and she tends to hug who she feels close to, and she will wave or say hi to everyone else. She does what she wants.
What about you, John?
No, I never experienced that as a kid, luckily. And if I had children of my own, I certainly wouldn't urge them to do anything that felt uncomfortable. I did wonder, Alex. I mean, this is such a difficult area to work in. I mean, how did you decide that this was the field that you wanted to pursue, something that was this difficult?
I kind of just fell into it. I was working in Milwaukee before I moved back home to Michigan, and the job that I had there it wasn't the right fit for me. So myself and my girlfriend, who's my wife now, we moved back to Michigan, and I was just applying for jobs. I wanted to just get out of Wisconsin and have something that was a little more my speed. And I saw this, and I saw it was involving children, and that was a population that I had always wanted to work with. And luckily I was able to get the job, and I guess I didn't exactly know the level of what I was going into, and especially how much we've grown in the first 3 years that we've been in existence, because I was kind of I don't know if I was the first hire, but I was, one of the very early people in the bigger machine of what we are now. So it's been really great to see sort of the evolution of the services that we've been able to provide. And, it's been something that I didn't really know I was going to be interested in, but then the more I do it, the more I enjoy being able to work with this population of kids, as difficult as the subject matter may be.
Do you find it difficult sometimes to separate yourself from the work? I mean, I feel like if I did what you did, I would never sleep again.
It is hard a lot of times. There's some stuff that you kind of do take home with you. But I think it's really important just, for me personally, to kind of at the end of the day just take stock of, what was something good that happened. Because I think probably the most difficult part of this job is kind of trying to take stock of the progress that these kids make, because it's slow, and it's slow for a reason, because trauma is really complex, and it takes a lot of sifting through all the details. And kids have setbacks, and they have they grow by leaps and bounds, and they take steps back every once in a while. So it's really important for me just to kind of at the end of the day kind of take stock of, what went really well today, even if looking for like those little victories in each of the sessions that I have, even when they're more difficult than others, because every little piece is a step forward to them growing and healing and being able to overcome this horrible thing that happened to them.
So, Alex, the other thing is what are the misconceptions people have about child abuse, and what are any of the stories that you've had that really kind of stuck with you you'd like to share? I mean, you don't have to, but
Right. There's tons of them. I try obviously to make the ones that went really well stick with me, because that's the kind of fuel that keeps you going. We've had a lot of kids who, just the other day, I was talking with a kid and we were just drawing and, coloring pictures or something like that. And, the kid just said, "You're very kind," like out of nowhere. And, that was really impactful for me, because it helps me to feel like I'm working in the right direction, and that even when I feel like I'm spinning my wheels or things are starting to stagnate, that something that we're doing here is working. A lot of the really great moments, I think, have been kind of when you see the entire team, the whole collaboration kind of come together. So I've been able to attend a few of the sentencings for some of the kids that I've seen in counseling. So they've already been through, they've had the investigation, they've went through that process, they've went through the prosecution process. A lot of them have already testified and done things like that, and then they have the opportunity at the sentencing of the offender that abused them. They get the opportunity to kind of speak their piece and make a statement to the judge and to everybody in the courtroom, and that's been a really powerful experience to be able to see, because that's a huge. I don't know if I could do something like that, and to see somebody who's 8 years old or 13 years old who's been through something that none of us would ever want a child to go through in their entire life, and see them kind of take all that power back, because that's what trauma does. It takes power away from you, and to see them kind of take that back for themselves in such a powerful way, that's probably one of the most amazing things about working here, is being able to see that growth in these kids.
Now, Small Talk has been around since 2011. I believe the website is smalltalkcac.org. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so we'll put that on our website to show people, because I think, yes, it is a very tough area that you're working in, but it's a very necessary area. I remember when the Peace Fund used to do the School Makes a Difference program. We would deal with the court system, child services, who would have children from abused families or families that had gone through, and the kids were now in a system, in the court system, and nobody had them. Not the mother, not the father, nobody, and they were very closed, and I can't imagine what some of these kids have gone through, and some of the kids have gone through worse stuff. But there were a lot of ways we found that were very useful. And you mentioned about drawing. I think one of the great things that kids have, which is an expression which doesn't necessarily have to do with talking. It's a physical doing of something, whether it's reading a story or drawing a picture or that's very telling as to what their emotions, because sometimes they can't put it into words. So I think it's a very interesting, concept that you mentioned there, because I think that's a very important tool.
Yeah, I think that a lot of kids, especially kids that are very young and don't have, you or I, we're adults, we've been able to grow up, we know a lot of words.
Well, actually,
from a very practical standpoint, we know a lot of words. We are, we're fluent in our language, and there's a lot of, younger kids that just because of their age, they aren't. So they can't necessarily express, this, person touching me made me feel angry. It made me feel sad. They can't say that, but they can draw it. Right. Or they can, we have sand tray here at our office. They can, kind of express it through their play in the sand tray. Or sometimes with older, one of the things I've started doing with older kids is I've been using like comic books with certain themes, and then letting them borrow it and take it home, and then we kind of bring it back, and they'll we'll discuss it. What kind of themes did you see in the comic book that kind of relate to how you've been able to deal with the trauma or the abuse or and things like that. We do lots of arts and crafts. That's usually something that's really helpful. Even kids being able to have something like tactile that they can hold on to, like a stress ball or something while they're talking, sometimes that gives them the comfort that they need to be able to say how they feel about certain things. And sometimes doing those activities, like you said, that are kind of not as direct, so we're not sitting across from each other. It's not like you see in, cartoons or, it's not Freudian where somebody's laying on the couch and I'm sitting in his chair behind him and talking to him the entire time. We try to get them to be active and doing something, because that kind of, for some kids, not all, but that direct kind of eye contact, let's look at each other and talk for a half hour, is, that's not going to be helpful for them. And we want to do something that's going to be helpful and help them grow and help them feel better.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please keep up the good work, and thank you for doing what you do, because I think it's a very important part of society to actually, rehabilitate children that have gone through some trauma of that nature. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yes, Alex, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So that was Alex Grace from Small Talk. We'll have it on our show, on our website later on. Crisis Counselor for Small Talk Children's Assessment. They've been around since 2011. So, John, we're getting very quickly out of time. We need to bring our Hero of the Week. We want a positive side of this. There will be some other things I do want to mention, some other organisations making a difference in this subject. But, John, go ahead. There's a couple of updates you need to bring us.
Yes, let's do our Hero of the Week quickly. When 12-year-old Laura Grace Henry of Prattville, Alabama was just 5 years old, she heard about the Children's Miracle Network, which raises money for children's hospitals across the United States and Canada. She was so moved by what she learned that she started pounding the pavement in her own neighborhood, going door to door, asking her neighbors for donations to help children in need. Laura Grace's mother, Dee Dee, works for Montgomery County in Alabama, and one day she had some work to do at a local domestic violence shelter. Knowing how enthusiastic her daughter was about volunteering, she took Laura Grace with her. And as this little girl looked around the shelter, she thought to herself, these facilities are modern, but they're also very sad. And Laura Grace decided that some remodeling was in order. So through bake sales, garage sales, lemonade stands, Laura Grace funded the construction of an indoor clubhouse where kids who have undergone terrible trauma can feel safe and play together and laugh together and actually get to feel like kids. Construction of Laura's clubhouse began in 2013. The clubhouse opened in 2014, and Laura Grace painted it and decorated it with 25 other kids that she had recruited to her cause. Books, toys, video games, art supplies, the works. To organize all of these young volunteers that she recruits, Laura Grace founded her own organization called It Starts With One in 2012. You can find it at startswith1.org. That's startswith1.org. She's raised $7,000 for the One Place Family Justice Center, where she built the clubhouse, and an additional $22,000 for other local and national charities, along with publishing a book called It Starts With One, Kids Can Volunteer Too. If you go to startswith1.org, you can read Laura Grace's blog, where she gives other kids the information they need to volunteer for all of the projects that she keeps track of. It's amazing what she keeps track of and how she's constantly dispatching kids here and there. You guys go take care of this. You guys go take care of that. It's incredible for a girl who's 12 years old. Fantastic. She even has something similar to our Hero of the Week, where she recognizes children for the good work that they do. Laura Grace says, I try to help kids find what they're interested in. I feel that more children should step up and volunteer. They'll feel really good about the difference one person can make. Laura Grace has won the Prudential Prudential Spirit of Community Award, the Hasbro Community Action Hero Award, and was recognized as a daily point of light at President Bush's pointsoflight.org. And today, thanks to her own accomplishments and the civic duty she inspires in other children, Laura Grace Henry of Prattville, Alabama, is a Peace Fund Radio Hero of the Week.
Well done.
Yeah,
Amazing.
it's interesting. In listening to her story and reading a couple of other things here, when her mom took her to the Family Justice Center, she said it's very big, and from looking at it from a child's point of view, I remember when I was a young kid in what we used to call, it's like kindergarten or that, up until about age 10 years old. The school looks a certain size, looks enormous to you. When you get to 17, and I went back there, the school looked so tiny. So from a child's perspective, sometimes it's very interesting to get their perspective on certain things, which we as adults might not even take into consideration. So it was good that, they were able to actually take her into account when they redid the centre, because obviously they did it in the way that a child would feel safe and feel comfortable to be in that type of environment, rather than what us adults would think is a safe environment for a child.
Absolutely. And later on today, I'm going to put on our blog at blog.thepeacefund.org a link to an article that shows Laura in her clubhouse, which again is just amazing. And again, you think these kids who have undergone this terrible trauma, she's made a place where they can feel like kids again. And I think that's fantastic. I also wanted to say that we are very close to meeting our $3,000 goal for Jordan, the young man who we're trying to help through our Peace Fund Helping Hand initiative. Please go to thepeacefund.org. In the upper right-hand corner, you can click on a link to read Jordan's story. He's struggling to stay in school after traumatic years of his mother having 2 divorces, moving from one coast to another, his mother's battle with breast cancer, his grandmother's illness and death. It's unbelievable what this little boy has gone through, and he's just trying to stay in school.
The interesting thing is, John, that's not all of it. I know more stuff about what's gone on in his life that has nothing to do with, is not included in this story. That when I first heard the story and I put it out towards the board, we got one comment from somebody, not from the board, from somebody else, who said this story is incredible. Has anybody checked it out?
It's almost
too unbelievable when you look at it and you go, really? So, we've raised this amount of money right now. We urge you, $25, $50, $10, just help us get this initiative, our Helping Hand initiative, to finalize our first one. We will be looking at another child right after that. We have a few celebrities I've been talking to this weekend that are really interested in what we're doing. One of my friends that I spent a lot of time with, Jason David Frank, has been very gracious to actually offer his time at some point, so we're going to be talking to him. But we've got a lot of things that we're going to be doing next week. I do believe we have Kerry Elways coming onto the show. If nothing happens, he'll be talking about child soldiers next week. I want to actually bring a couple of other things in the meantime, because we are running out of time slightly. A couple of organizations making a difference in child abuse. www.childhelp.org. Their goal is to meet the physical, emotional, educational and spiritual needs of an abused, neglected and at-risk children. They focus on prevention, intervention, treatment and community outreach. You should check them out. They will be on our blog and on our website later on. Also, another organisation making a difference for the abolition and restoration, founded in 2002, is love146.org. They work towards the abolition of child trafficking and exploitation through prevention and aftercare solutions, contributing to the growing abolition movement. It's you should check that out. Another type of child abuse that is very, very ripe, as we talked last week. Slavery is child slavery or human trafficking is the number 2. The number 2 criminal offence in the world.
Only after illegal drugs. It's stunning.
Only after illegal drugs, exactly. So I think we're coming up to the end of this. John, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I would quickly like to urge everybody to go to thepeacefund.org, read Jordan's story. We can hit our goal today. We can do this today, everybody. Just to help out this little guy. You'll turn his life around and give him his life back.
Yeah, and obviously, we will be bringing you different things. Please check back with it, because, it might not touch you. There'll be another story that may touch you. If you also think that we're doing good things on Peace Fund Radio, you can also go to the Peace Fund Radio wall to donate to actually keep our show on air and support us in what we're trying to accomplish here. John,
and share us on Twitter and Facebook, Peace Fund, The Peace Fund, and Peace Fund Radio. Follow Adrian at AdrianPaul1, Ethan at Combat Radio to learn about all the other ways you can help.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you to all of you that have supported us. Thank you to those of you that came to the Sword presentation demo over the weekend. And it was all donations were given to the Jordan initiative. In closing, a quote from Herbert Ward. Child abuse casts a shadow the length of a lifetime. This is Adrian Paul and Ethan Dettenmaier. We'll talk to you next week.
You're listening to Peace Fund Radio with Ethan Dettenmaier and Adrian Paul, right here on LA Talk Radio.